These are dark times, there is no denying. Our world has perhaps faced no greater threat than it does today. But I say this to our citizenry. We, ever your servants, will continue to defend your liberty and repel the forces that seek to take it from you.
You're listening to The Stephen Tauriello Show, building a platform of liberty for people in search of truth with a dash of hope and a life worth living. The Stephen Tauriello Show. And now, here's Stephen.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you look around, you see all these conflicts in all these different regions, and it's really hard not to think that we are in World War right now. And I've been saying this for months. A lot of people have been saying this, other podcasters and radio hosts. These are the beginning days of a World War III. And so I looked into what determines World War. And typically, World War refers to a large-scale international conflict involving multiple countries or alliances. While there is no strict, universally agreed-upon definition, several factors often determine whether a conflict is considered a world war. So number one is geographic scope. A world war involves countries from various regions or continents with battles and engagements occurring on a global scale. It's not confined to a single region. Number two is number of major participants. A world war typically includes a significant number of major powers or nations, often with powerful military capabilities and extensive resources. Number three, alliances and coalitions. Multiple alliances or coalitions form with countries joining together to combat a common enemy or group of enemies. This can lead to a complex web of international relationships. And number four, widespread impact. A world war has far-reaching consequences not only in terms of casualties, but also economically, socially, and politically, affecting many nations. And number five, prolonged duration. World wars are characterized by their extended duration, often spanning several years. Ladies and gentlemen, it sounds like we're in a world war right now. I mean, I'm just going to go out and say it. The only thing that would be keeping this from being a world war is if the United States had boots on the ground in these countries actually fighting in these wars. But are we that far off? I mean, if you go down the list of criteria, we meet every single one of these, except for boots on the ground. And that's for now. And listen, if a lot of these things get heated up any more than what they already are, then I don't see how the United States doesn't send soldiers into these different regions and areas. You have a lot of people in Congress, a lot of these politicians, the warmongers, the military-industrial complex, they're drooling. They're fomenting at the mouth to send U.S. troops over to Ukraine. So imagine what is going to be happening here in the next coming days and weeks with all this carnage coming out of the Israeli war. So, I mean, think about the greater picture. Just kind of step back, look at a 10,000-foot view. We have a war in Ukraine we're funding. We have a war in Israel. You have Kim Jong-un that is working with Russia to buy bombers and supersonic missiles. This just came out in the Irish Times a few days ago. And in fact, it was the same day that the savage attacks on Israel. So this got overlooked. Kim Jong-un inspects nuclear-capable bombers as he meets Russian defense minister. North Korean leader's trip to Russia comes amid momentum in military cooperation between the countries. So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has inspected Russia's nuclear-capable bombers, hypersonic missiles, and an advanced warship from its Pacific Fleet as he continued a trip in the country's Far East. Yeah, so he was over there buying ships, buying bombers with nuclear capabilities, and most of all, and most notably, which people should definitely be paying attention to, is the hypersonic missile technology. The hypersonic missile technology is a death nail for the United States because we're lacking in that technology. We don't have it yet. They say we're 2 or 3 years behind. How that happens, I don't know. But a lot of it has to do with spies. A lot of it has to do with this country, people like the Bidens, selling out this country, selling our technology to China. This is what happens when you have a corrupt government and a corrupt military-industrial complex. You have countries like China and Russia creating technology before we do, which puts us at a disadvantage. For the first time ever, the United States is at a disadvantage when it comes to weaponry and technology. So you have the Ukraine we're funding, you have Israel that we're now going to be funding, and then you have Kim Jong-un, North Korea, working with Russia to buy nuclear-capable weapons or nuclear-capable bombers and hypersonic missiles. You have the U.S. that's been appeasing Iran for years with the Iran nuclear deal. And just recently, everybody knows that the Biden administration released $6 billion to Iran. For whatever reason, I have no idea. A lot of people are saying that because of that release of that money is what led to this assault on Israel, because it freed up money in other areas. And so the Biden administration wanted to come out and tell us, oh, the $6 billion, it's for humanitarian. We made them promise us it's only going to be used for humanitarian. And then people started asking, but yeah, when you give somebody money, it frees up money from other places. So this administration really thinks the people are dumb. All right, so you have that. And now Iran is assisting Russia with weapons and supplies to fight Ukraine. We did an article about this not that long ago, where you have Iran is sending the Shahid drones to Russia to use against Ukraine. We are funding Iran, so therefore that makes us funding both sides of the Ukraine-Russia war. All right? Iran is suspected to be behind this latest attack on Israel. Reports are coming out that Iran's fingerprints are all over this savage attack on Israel. So not only did we fund Iran that's giving weapons to Russia to fight Ukraine, but we're assisting Iran and appeasing Iran, which caused Iran to launch this savage attack against Israel. So again, the United States is funding both sides of this war. The U.S. left behind billions. This is a show that we did a couple days ago. The U.S. left billions in equipment and weapons in Afghanistan, like $80 billion worth of weapons and equipment. And we went through the whole list. And I'm sorry, but people have to assume that those weapons and that equipment is going to be used in these next coming days and weeks against Israelis, against the IDF. Because why wouldn't they? You're talking 20 million rounds of AK-47, 20-millimeter Gatling guns, 4 C-130s, attack choppers, 600,000 small arms, the M4 platforms, and the M16. Like, all these weapons that the Biden administration left in Afghanistan could now possibly be used against Israel. So our own weapons may be used against Israelis, against the IDF. Again, funding both sides of the war. And then now, Russia and China have an alliance, and China is planning on taking Taiwan. We know the Chinese Communist Party has been drooling at the mouth at taking Taiwan. And why would you not do it now? Like, now would be the best time to strike. We all know this. Like, if you were China, just put yourself in China's shoes. If you were China and you seen the U.S. essentially depleting their munitions in all these different conflicts, funding both sides of the war, why would you not think it was a good time to go take what you want to take? Well, this just came out today from the Epoch Times. The CCP media warns U.S., quote, Taiwan for Israel. So China's communist regime hasn't condemned the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas attacks on Israel and the massacre of Israeli civilians since it happened last Saturday. This is true. Since this attack happened, I've been trying to find, through the Chinese media, I've been trying to find what the hell China's been up to. I can't find nothing. It's been media silence over there up until today, up until about 3 hours ago. So the ruling Chinese Communist Party official media published an article warning the United States, quote, if you interfere with us taking Taiwan, we will mess with your Israel. Folks, we're entering World War III right now. You're watching the beginning days of World War III. I told you what the criteria was in a world war. The only thing that would not make this a world war is boots on the ground, is American soldiers in these regions. That is it. Once that happens, and it most likely will, we will officially be in World War. So we would officially be in World War III. So what did they say about Trump? What was all that stuff they were saying? Oh, Donald Trump was going to get us into World War III. Donald Trump was going to collapse the economy. Donald Trump was going to ruin our foreign policy. Everything they said Donald Trump was going to do, the Biden administration has done. How anybody can continue to vote for another 4 years of this is insane. I just don't understand how anybody can look at the situation we've been going through the last 3 years and say, yeah, this is great. We want another 4 years of this. I don't see how it's possible. I don't. I really don't. And I find it awfully coincidental how COVID came around about a year before the election. And then now we have all these wars and conflicts starting almost at the exact same time. COVID, I think COVID hit the States around January, but it was actually being reported on around this time back in 2019. And so here we are. It is hard to think that there is not a greater plan to all of this. It is hard to think and imagine that this isn't being coordinated by the military-industrial complex and globalists from around the world. It's so hard to think that. It really is. You have to really not be paying attention in order to think that all this stuff isn't connected. And now with China talking about if America interferes with China taking Taiwan, then they're going to go after Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a world war. We are entering world war. That is it. I think this is part of a bigger plan. I got some reading here from a user on Twitter or X, and he makes a really, really good point. It's, I would probably say, controversial, and it is, but it seems closer to the truth than what we're getting from our media. And so there was a user who goes by the handle Sovereign Bra, which is B-R-A-H, Sovereign Bra. And he published a very proactive post on the Israel war. And these thoughts are likely to be among the most contentious you'll ever encounter on the subject, but they're interesting and very popular online at the moment. So this is what he has to say. I've kept an eye on the Israel situation for the past few days. Here's what I've learned, and here are my blunt and honest thoughts. Number 1, Israel chose to ignore intelligence from Egyptian officials about a major attack coming from Hamas. This is true. There is no doubt this was an intelligence failure, and now reports are starting to reveal that Israel was warned and informed about a possible large-scale attack by, they didn't say by who, but they just said a large-scale attack. How true it is, we don't know. But that's what the reports are starting to say, which would mean this was a giant failure on the intelligence community, or it was allowed to happen. Look, I didn't say this was going to be agreeable. I'm just telling you what this guy wrote, and I have to say I agree with a lot of what he says. This is just what we know so far. All right, that doesn't mean I'm not trying to justify what happened. I'm just saying what happened. All right, he goes in. Number 2, multiple former IDF soldiers and Israeli intelligence personnel have come forward online and said there's a 0% chance Israel was unaware of this attack beforehand or couldn't have prevented it. Number 3, we just watched unsophisticated terrorists on hang gliders soar into one of the most heavily defended and surveilled countries on the planet. And I would add to this, how was it possible that all these terrorists were able to train and learn how to fly these hang gliders and paragliders with nobody seeing? No surveillance, no satellite images, no nothing, no informants, no intelligence when these terrorists are learning how to fly giant hang gliders and paragliders by the dozens and nobody stopped to ask questions? I don't know, man. I don't know. All right, so back into the article. Number 4, within 48 hours of the attack, we're now suddenly seeing enormous support for an American war with Iran and the genocide of the Palestinian people. This, I'm not so sure I agree with. I don't know if they're calling for genocide on the Palestinian people. They're calling for Hamas to be eradicated. That is for sure. And I don't blame them at all. I think Israel should go in there, and we should support them going in there any way we can. And there's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides. Both sides. There's going to be a lot of carnage. There's no doubt about it. Because I think what they're doing now, what Hamas did by taking all these hostages and going and taking them back to Gaza, I think was part of the plan. I think it's going to be one giant trap for the Israelis. I do. I'm just going to throw that out there. I think it's all part of the plan. Israel has essentially carpet bombed Gaza and leveled a few buildings. So there's a lot of rubble over there in Palestine right now. Now Israel's going to go in. Netanyahu brought in 300,000 troops. They're going to go in and essentially sweep Gaza and eradicate the Hamas terrorists inside that area. The problem is it's urban combat, which means door to door. Kicking doors in is extremely dangerous. It's probably going to be booby-trapped, no doubt about it. And there's going to be civilians commingled with terrorists. A lot of people don't understand that these terrorists, they're not militants. You know, I know the left-wing media keeps wanting to call this a military attack and that these are militants. These are terrorists. This was a terrorist attack. These Hamas savages do not wear uniforms. They do not, they're not fighting military tactics. They are dressed just like civilians, and in fact, they use civilians as cover. They specifically set up their operations in schools and businesses and populated apartment buildings so that Israel won't bomb the entire building. So they do this on purpose. They hide behind civilians like cowards because they know Israel is not going to bomb a building with a bunch of innocent people inside. And so these people going in there is going to be extremely dangerous, and there's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides. So we need to prepare ourselves for that in the next coming days. All right, back to the article. Number 4. Did I already do number 4? Oh, so he said enormous support for an American war with Iran. Yes, I am starting to see something very familiar with what we've seen with COVID, where the entire media apparatus, the government, all the government institutions, and a vast portion of the population are all stuck on this emotional frenzy, where they're reacting emotionally, and they're really not, taking any second thought in any of this, and it's just like a one-way mindset. I think cooler heads are going to prevail, and I think sometimes it's good to just sit back, investigate, find out what happened, and see what's going on. I totally support Israel going in there and wiping Hamas off the map, but they need to do it strategically so we do not end up in a global conflict. All right? That's just my 2 cents. So this guy continues. He says, I'm witnessing American pastors and formerly level-headed influencers in our world completely lose their minds and the call for genocide. I noticed this too. A lot of Republicans and conservative commentators and influencers on YouTube and so on and so forth, as soon as this happened, they said, we're going to war. You have presidential candidates coming out on stage saying, finish them. They're saying, go to war with Iran? Like they're already calling out war with Iran. This is very stupid, very, very dangerous for these people to be talking like this. And this is what happens when you let emotions get the best of you. All right? We're not going to do that here. Cooler heads are going to prevail here, and we're going to go through this very intuitively, and we're going to investigate, and we're going to go through both sides of the story here. All right? So he goes on. It's unsurprising, but insane to watch. If the events of the past 3 years have taught me anything, is that when people get whipped into an emotional frenzy, critical thinking completely goes out the window. People become highly suggestible and will rush to extremely dangerous conclusions without thinking about the consequences. I think this is what we're all witnessing with this situation in Israel. I have to agree with this guy. I do too. I think you have a lot of the warmongers that have their finger on the button ready to push it. You have a lot of people like Lindsey Graham, a lot of the warmongering Republicans, conservatives, and Democrats. Democrats are pro-war now. I don't know how that happened, but it happened. And so a lot of people, I just feel like they're letting their emotions get the best of them. And we need to take a different approach. We do not need to end up in another 20-year war in the Middle East. And if we just go in there guns a-blazing, that's exactly where we're going to be. And none of us want that, right? 20 years, after 20 years in the Middle East, after surrendering $85 billion worth of supplies and equipment, and we just hightailed out of there. Essentially a repeat of Vietnam, but 17 times more expensive and 4 times as long. So I think it's best that we take a different approach on this, and we stop letting these people pull us into these never-ending conflicts, especially in the Middle East. So I agree with this guy on that. So back to this guy's writing here. I'm reminded of Pearl Harbor and 9/11. In both scenarios, the American government received intelligence in advance of the attacks, but chose not to prevent the attacks. Why? The American government was willing to sacrifice the lives of American citizens in order to advance its geopolitical goals. Sounds kind of familiar. Sounds kind of like the Iran nuclear deal, where the Obama administration and the Biden administration both wanted a Iran nuclear deal so bad that they were willing to give them billions, even though they chant death to America. They are willing to appease Iran in ways none of us would. Any rational person, any rational American would have said, we are absolutely not going to give the country that hates us billions and billions of dollars just to get some type of deal where they promise us they're not making nuclear weapons. That was a stupid deal, and it was a dangerous deal. And now I think the American people are paying the price. I really do. Donald Trump came in and canceled that immediately because it's a dumb idea to pay your enemies. It is a dumb idea to give Iran, the number one state sponsor for terrorism, billions of dollars. And I think the reason why is pretty self-explanatory now. So 9/11 gave justification to invade the Middle East and drastically expand the American military-industrial complex and their surveillance apparatus. They were brutal and extremely traumatic events for the American people, for the American public to witness. The emotional trauma caused people to get whipped up into an emotional frenzy. I agree. I remember I was pissed off and I was only in 8th grade. I remember saying, we got to go over there. We got to get revenge. We must. And look, a lot of people did sign up for the military. This guy's exactly right. After 9/11 was exactly when we started a 20-year war. Almost the exact same thing we're watching unfold right now. So I think it's time we take a different approach to this, huh? So America wanted one thing in response to these attacks: the blood of our enemies. I see the same psyop playing out now. People are whipped into a frenzied bloodlust. In their frenzied bloodlust, people are overlooking some seriously important facts here. Notably, number one, the fact that none of this adds up. Number two, innocent civilians are being threatened with genocide. And number three, escalated violence in the Middle East and a war with Iran both risk the rest of the planet getting dragged into World War III. What happened in Israel this weekend was obviously gut-wrenching and awful to witness, but I do not trust Israel's so-called intelligence failure, nor do I trust the snakes in Washington calling for war with Iran. And I sure in the hell no longer trust any of the emotionally frenzied influencers calling for explicit genocide of innocent civilians. This was a defining moment in history, similar to Pearl Harbor, 9/11, COVID, the beginning of the Ukraine war, etc. And a lot of people just got played. Hard. People responded by going full mask off, exposing themselves as reckless and incapable of exercising sound judgment in moments of chaos and heightened emotion. And we're now at the brink of World War III because of it. This is all worth noting. There is a high likelihood there will be more chaos throughout the rest of this decade. There will be more psychological operations. There will be more moments in time in which cooler heads ought to prevail, but people will get whipped into an emotional frenzy instead. Keep your wits about you and be cautious in whom you allow yourself to be influenced by. Recognize that governments and the intelligence agencies spend enormous resources waging psychological operations on social media nonstop when stuff like this goes down. Remember that when chaos is at its peak, history shows there is almost always a hidden agenda being played out. And that hidden agenda is always designed to prey on our base emotions to facilitate a desired end result. Pray for the world peace tonight. I agree with this guy a lot. I don't know about his use of the genocide. I really don't. The history of the conflicts in the Middle East go back thousands of years, specifically Israel and Palestine. They go back thousands of years. These people have been in each other's throats for thousands of years. And it's been getting more and more violent over the decades. But I agree with this, guys. Stuff doesn't add up here, folks. It's not adding up. I mean, yes, we need to let Israel do what they need to do. And that is go in there and wipe Hamas off the map. That's it. You cannot expect Israel to not defend themselves. And the fact that these people want to kill Jewish people just because they're Jews is sickening to me. And it's time for it to stop. But also, Israel needs to play their cards right here. They need to be very careful not to spread this conflict. And I can't help myself but to determine we are, in fact, in World War. These are the beginning days of World War III. Write it down, mark it on your calendar. Remember these days, because I'm telling you there is going to be rougher and rougher years ahead if we do not get control of this situation. We cannot have somebody like Joe Biden who just allows the deep state bureaucracy in the military-industrial complex to take the wheel of this country and drive us off a cliff. Okay? The American people are sick of it. We just are. I say we arm Israel to the teeth, give them what they need to do what they got to do. But also Israel needs to be careful. But to allow the military-industrial complex and Washington bureaucracy to get us into another Middle Eastern conflict for God knows how long, and it's not just any conflict, but World War III, because you have all these other nations and regions all at each other's throats, all wanting to kill one another and conquer them. And I'm telling you right now, if China decides to invade Taiwan, which, based off this article that just came out an hour ago, it seems likely. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot fight a multi-front war right now. We can't do it. If the U.S. military, if the United States, it gets dragged into another war, a multi-front war where we're going up against Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran, we will lose. We will lose. I'm telling you, we need cooler heads in this situation. We must get somebody that knows what they're doing. We must change our leadership. We have to. We cannot allow someone like Joe Biden to be commander-in-chief in the beginning days of World War III. Folks, I just read an article where Joe Biden is confusing the wars in the briefings. The man is confusing the Ukraine war with the war in Iraq. He's calling these wars different wars. Okay, he's confusing the Ukraine war with what's going on in Israel. This is very scary. This is not a joke. So, this is all because of the Democrats. This is all because Democrats could not get a grip on their emotions. And now we have an administration which is turning out to be a human pandemic. Okay? This administration is so destructive, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. And everything that they said Donald Trump was going to do, this administration has done. It's time for Democrats to get a grip. We must get somebody in there that is not going to get this country destroyed. I'll be damned if I'm going to send my son off to go fight for something that Joe Biden and this corrupt Washington establishment started. I'm not doing it. And neither should you. But we have a dangerous situation here, and not just overseas, but here in the States. You now have millions and millions of illegal immigrants, of people we have no idea who they are, where they're from, that could be possibly sleeper cells inside the country. The leader for the Hamas just came out yesterday calling for an uprising of all Muslims inside the United States and around the world to essentially spill the blood of Americans and Jews. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of these people, how many of these radical Muslims are inside this country? I'm not saying all Muslims are radicals. I'm not saying that. All right, so I want to get that out of the way right now. But we allowed 400,000 people from these Muslim nations, which are known to be radical, inside our country, that could all be part of this broader plan. And I'm sorry, but it all seems to be one giant war game right now. It does not seem like any of this is organic. It doesn't. The Russia-Ukraine war was not organic. We're not just funding Iran that's funding Russia, and we're funding Ukraine for no reason. We are funding all this stuff. All our fingerprints are involved in all of this stuff. And I'm sorry, but I think our leaders and our military-industrial complex has gotten this country into a pickle, a really bad pickle. And don't ever think that it's going to be these people sending their sons and daughters to go die for this country. Never think that, because it never happens and it never will. This is a problem that dates back to thousands of years, to the ancient Romans. You had a separation in class, and it was the military and political leaders that were sending the civilians off to go die in wars that they created. Don't let that happen here. Cooler heads need to prevail. We need to sit back, we need to analyze the situation, and we need to come up with a plan. Because with this Hamas leader, with this psychopath telling all Muslims around the world to rise up and fight, essentially commit jihad against Americans and Jews, I want my listeners to be prepared. Your government is not going to protect you if something like this were to happen. I called my brother last night, and I told him to make sure that he's prepared. If you have a gun in your home, you need to get it out. You need to clean it, make sure it works, and you need to stay vigilant. Keep your head on a swivel, man. I don't know what it is, but I just have a bad feeling. Okay? 400,000 people inside this country could possibly be like some kind of sleeper cell radical Muslim, radical Hamas terrorist. We don't know. We don't know because the Biden administration and the Democrat Party opened our borders to millions and millions of people. We have no idea who they are. They stopped DNA testing, okay? And do I need to remind you, it took 20 Muslim terrorists. It took 20 terrorists to take out the World Trade Center. What do you think 15,000 could do? Because 15,000 would be just a small fraction of the 400,000 we brought into this country from Muslim nations. 15,000 of them would cause a lot of damage. And I'm sorry, I can't help but think that the same type of people that were able to take down 2 giant skyscrapers, killing 3,000 Americans, are dumb. They are not dumb. And in fact, they prey on their enemies' weaknesses, just like they did with Israel. I can't imagine being a radical terrorist that wants to destroy a country and not want to get through a porous border that they're allowing millions and millions of immigrants to flow through. If I was a terrorist, that's exactly where I would be going. If I wanted to infiltrate a country to commit acts of violence against that country. How would I get in there? Through a porous, open southern border. Folks, I cannot tell you enough. We need to make sure that we stay vigilant. We need to make sure that I don't want anything to happen to anybody listening to this right now. People need to stay vigilant. I'm not trying to be a fearmonger. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. I'm not trying to make clickbait. I'm legitimately trying to warn anybody that's listening to this to stay frosty. Because I can't help but wonder if this is part of one giant plan to get this country into another world war. And so if you have a gun, make sure it's cleaned, make sure it's operational. Keep it with you. All this is supposed to happen on Friday. Make sure you're not going out to any busy areas or any major cities on Friday. I know Americans want to sit there and say, I'm not going to let some terrorists keep me inside my home. I'm not going to be driven by fear. I understand that. I totally do. I'm not telling you to stay home. All I'm telling you is just be aware. Stay frosty. Watch your six. Because I think this is all part of one big plan. Somehow, some way, I don't know. None of this stuff is coincidental. None of these wars started organically. This is all part of a bigger plan. I told you, we did a show a long time ago talking about how China had the ability to sink a carrier battle group. And with hypersonic missile technology. Essentially overwhelming the USS Gerald Ford and sunk it to the bottom of the sea. So China had a war game scenario simulator where they essentially simulated their attack on Taiwan and United States Navy's response. And in that simulation, they sunk the USS Gerald Ford to the bottom of the sea in 15 minutes with overwhelming hypersonic missiles. In an additional 15 minutes, they sunk all the other battleships and supply carriers all around it. So in 30 minutes, they sunk every single ship part of that carrier battle group. in 30 minutes with hypersonic technology. This is no joke. We have serious situations going on, and I never thought I would say this, but if the United States gets involved in a multiple front war with Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, we will lose. You're talking about these ships. My dad was on the USS Eisenhower, and I seen this boat in real life when I was small, and the thing was huge. You know how everything looks bigger when you're little? No. This thing is huge. Like, I'm saying, like, it's the size of a city. And it carries the population of a small city. It carries about 5,000 sailors. So there's 5,000 men and women on these aircraft carriers. 5,000. If one of these were to sink to the bottom of the sea, you're talking about 5,000 souls on board. Gone. 2 carriers, that's 10,000 souls on board. We need to make sure cooler heads prevail in this situation. I just told you what determines a world war. And folks, the only thing that's keeping this from being a world war is boots on the ground in these regions. Other than that, we are in the beginning days of a world war. So I would like to treat this as that situation. And another thing is, does anybody honestly think that if we actually did have boots on the ground in these regions, that this administration would be honest to the American people? No. This is why it's so dangerous to have a non-transparent administration like this. This is why it's so dangerous to have a rogue government like we have that has no transparency, to where the American people have no idea what it's up to. You have an administration that would be willing to do anything just to make it look better, just to protect the optics. So we have an administration that does not have the American people's best interest at heart. The Biden administration allowed this military-industrial complex and the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy to take the wheel of this country, and it's driving us right off a cliff. Joe Biden is not able to do this. The man should be in a nursing home, okay? I don't think he should be in control of the theater of World War III. I just don't. And I know nobody else does either. But this is a time for people to get serious, because these are serious times. And what we do from here on out may determine the future of this country. And I'm not just talking about elections. I'm talking about real-life war. You have a leader of terrorist groups calling for the uprising of Muslims across the world. You have an administration that allowed millions of illegal immigrants into this country that possibly could have sleeper cells within those millions of people that could just be waiting for the command from their leader. You have China chomping at the bit to get the Taiwan, that essentially said if we assist Taiwan, then they're going to attack Israel. So China is threatening, if we defend Taiwan, then China is going to go after Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, Israel would not be able to withstand an attack from Iran and China. Nobody would. This administration has got us into a this administration has got us into a pickle. This administration has got us into a real bad situation. And like I said, cooler heads need to prevail. So again, stay frosty, watch your 6, keep your head on a swivel, and make sure if you have a gun, keep it on you. This government is not going to protect you, okay? I know you're probably saying, yeah, but Steven, do we really need gun? Yes. If you do not have a gun, go buy one. Okay? This kind of stuff goes way deeper than partisan politics. You're talking about war. You're talking about active threats on our country from a terrorist leader. You're talking about multiple different nations threatening the destruction of this country, threatening the destruction of our allies. It is time to get serious, and I am getting serious. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be working on a show right after this. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. I want to make sure I focus on what's happening domestically. I do not want this to be a complete distraction of all the chaos that's happening here within the United States, but I am going to keep up with what I think is World War III, and I will share any information that I get. The latest information coming out is that China is threatening the United States, that if we intervene with China taking Taiwan, that they're going to go after Israel. So I will definitely keep you up with the latest of what is happening, this multi-front war that we find ourselves in. And so that way you guys are informed. Informed people make informed decisions. I want all my listeners or anyone listening to this to be safe. Make sure you keep your head on a swivel. Stay safe. If you guys want to get a hold of me or you have any questions, get a hold of me at StephenTaurielloShow@gmail.com. Anything at all, if you want to ask me anything, I'm going to leave these research articles that I have on my podcast description so you can read them for yourselves. Make sure you go in and read the Epic Times article I'm going to put in. Make sure you read the Irish Times article talking about North Korea buying weapons from Russia. Read these articles so that you stay up to date. As always, I want you guys to have a good day. Stay frosty out there, and God bless you, and God bless America. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.